Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Make Your Mark podcast. And oh my goodness, I have been so excited for our guest today. Like for weeks, when she said that she's going to be coming on, I was super excited because I knew exactly what I was going to ask her. I knew the questions, right, that are going to be juicy, that you guys are going to want to listen to. And the great thing is, her business. Oh my goodness, she's making so much change, so much impact in the world and in the world of education, right? School education, well, we know there's masses of issues and challenges in the school system, but she's here to make some changes. And oh boy, has she blown up just recently. Oh, I don't know if I should tell you. Should I tell you or should I leave it? Maybe I'll just leave it to the end and mention it later on down the line where you have to listen and find out what's happened, how she's blown up, like she's actually been on TV. All right, please welcome to the stage, Radha. Oh my goodness, Radha, I'm so
Hi,
excited for you to be here.
I'm so excited to be here, Kate. Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. I knew I had to have you on here. When you said yes, I was like, this is going to be an epic episode, right? Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of what you're doing, how you're making change, like it's freaking awesome what you do. I would love for you to share with our audience today a little bit about your journey, right? Because we all know that building a business, right, making that big impact, making change in the world doesn't happen overnight. So, what did the journey look like for you?
Right, okay. Well, I haven't always been in business. Obviously, it's something that I've been doing so for maybe 4 years now. Previous to this, my career has always been in teaching throughout most of my sort of adult working life. I was a teacher in mainstream education for 15 odd years, SCMH for 8 years. So I've spent quite a lot of my working life sort of just being in that system, being a teacher. I sort of worked my way up the profession. I ended up falling into special education just because I think I suited it. It suited me. I sort of was able to relate to the sort of children that were in that sort of setting of education. And by the time I left, I was exams officer. I was a senior member of staff in the school that I worked in. And I'd sort of learnt about all different types of education and been practicing some pretty out there strategies for what worked and what didn't work with some really disengaged children. And then, yeah, I left in the pandemic just because everything changed. All the kids were at home. The world was looking very different. There were certain things in education that sort of I didn't, I suppose, on a personal level, agree with anymore. The landscape was changing, and I wanted to stay true to myself. And I launched Little Crafters Boxes, which is my company now. And even the company has evolved over the years. It started then as a craft subscription box for children, just to engage them and give them something fun to do during the pandemic when nobody was allowed to go out anywhere. But obviously the world went back to, well, as normal, if I can use that term. It went, pandemic came and went, and then the world changed again, and most kids went back to school. But my company evolved because lots of kids didn't actually go back to school, and home educating became, a really talked about subject. And 75% more children were home educating post-pandemic than they were pre-pandemic. And mental health became, so important because there was anxieties, there was all sorts of things that all of a sudden came to light that I think they were always there, but people were more sort of receptive to talking about them and actually addressing those issues. And I suppose we've evolved since then. I've been listening to my families that we work with since then and evolving and changing. And we're now at a point where, yes, we've still got the craft subscriptions that we do, but we also have a whole host of education that the company can provide, which is certified. So children are able to actually get access to learning and an alternative therapeutic way of learning from home, or from an alternative provision if they find mainstream education a challenge. So it's really exciting because I think for me, the vision has really become about making education accessible to everyone. And it's exciting because the landscape is changing, and we've grown now to a point where we're actually paving that way. It's revolutionary, some of the work that we're doing, and yeah, we're making a huge difference at the moment. It's great.
You definitely are. You definitely are. Now, a couple of questions that come to mind from what you just said here, right? Like you quit your job and decided to start a business during the pandemic. Now, didn't anyone say to you, you must be mad? You must be insane, right? Did you get any of that kind of adversity from friends and family? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, 100%. My immediate family, so my parents thought I was absolutely crazy. Obviously, I was in a senior role in a school after a long career, and I sort of quit for, I don't really know why I did it. I think it was coming anyway for a long time. There's a lot of red tape being a teacher now in today's day and age. There's a lot of sort of bureaucracy, and with things like Ofsted curriculums and being told what you have to teach. And then you've got the inner workings of schools and the politics that comes with that. And, it became, I suppose, over the years, less and less about the teaching and more about box ticking. And also, when I was in an SCMH school, one thing I learned was that, there was about 100 children that went to the school that I taught in back then. But for every one child that got a space there was 100 that went to tribunal and didn't. So I was seeing those gaps, and it was big then. It's way bigger even now. So, families are really fighting hard for those places. And where those children were not getting a place, a lot of them were sat on waiting lists for years at a time without an education. So I suppose a lot of what I did now was it came from knowing sort of where the gaps were in education. I suppose you'd have to work in the inner workings of the industry to really see that. And I did, and I saw it and I thought, actually, do you know what, we need this. Pandemic's happening right now anyway. It was a calculated risk. All the children were at home. So, it was just a fun craft subscription box. In my mind, I was thinking, do you know what? We'll manufacture these little craft boxes. I'm going to give up on my day job. I've done my bit for mankind. This is it now. I'm going to, we were working out of a little house where we used to live in Leicestershire. My husband was a joiner. He built me a little shed at the back, and I thought, I'm going to work out of here. I'm going to, make these little things and I'll send them out, and this will be my retirement, and I'll garden in my spare time, I had no idea it was going to get this big, to be fair. And here we are, multi six figures now. We're 3 years in, and it's just growing and growing and growing. The need is greater and greater. And well, we are, we're thriving. I'm loving it as well. I'm loving the impact that we're making, and I feel like we can really make some noise. And the more impact we make, the more inspiring it gets. So, it was going to be a cottage industry, but it's not much of a cottage anymore. And yeah, it's a much bigger beast. We've got big premises now and staff and everything.
Oh my goodness. So I want to go into that a little bit more. And we are going to be touching up on how your husband supports you. Okay? Because he is a big support. I know this. I saw your social media videos. I know what he gets up to in the background. Okay, so we're going to come to that in a moment. But what I really want to ask you right now is, you started up this business, right? You didn't know where it was going to take you. It was something that was inside of you that you just kind of felt like you needed to do, and it just expanded. Like, that just speaks volumes, right? There's people that always say, follow your desire, follow your heart, right? But people don't, I guess, understand what that means, or even follow on that kind of pull that they're getting to do something that they actually want to do and be passionate about. And so, how did you know, right? What was the feels? I guess I'm asking you is, when you realize, no, this has to be done. Like, big changes need to be made to kind of feel, I guess, fulfilled, and making sure that you're on the right track and on the right path of doing what you can do the most to bring the biggest impact.
Yeah. Okay, so to start off with, I knew that the concept would work because one of the things that I was practicing in my own classroom before I left teaching was hands-on learning and learning through play. I was working with really disengaged kids. And back then, my topic in my subject specialism is computer science. So teaching programming to children who refuse to write or are completely disengaged from curriculum learning was actually quite challenging. But I found play methods that, I bought little robots and things for them to program and mess around with. And there were times we'd turn the entire classroom into a working computer, so they'd have to program in sort of, when the door opens, it makes a creaking noise. And when you sort of touch the bananas, the different tunes come up on the computer, because they made like musical pianos and things like that. We used to do sort of those really sort of fun, engaging, play-based methods. And all of a sudden I was able to teach programming and teach quite difficult computational concepts to those kids. So that is how I knew that, a craft or a way of making and using hands was a really good way to engage learning. I saw the work that was being sent home for children, even at school during the pandemic. And that was, let's just say, not engaging enough for any child. Nobody wants to sit there and do 6 hours of English and maths while you're sat at home and already not allowed to go out.
Yeah.
With my own children, we sort of, school weren't very happy, but it all went in the bin. And, I took my kids out and showed them how to climb trees and things.
Oh my God, I love that. I love it. And in fact, I was going to come to that because I was like, you started a business during the pandemic, right? Whilst you had kids, right? And kids that you had to, I guess, homeschool at the same time, as well as being a wife, as well as being a mother, like being a daughter, all these different hats that you're wearing, not just in your business as you're starting up and you're a solo entrepreneur, but also all the hats you're wearing in your personal life. Like, how did you manage to juggle all those things?
I mean, I think back then it was easier than it probably is now, because the business was at the very start, and I wasn't envisioning that it was going to get this big so quickly. So, in my head, back then I had retired, from teaching. And I was going to have a little side business, working from home. And, I was going to be with my children, which is what I wanted anyway, where, because they were at home, I didn't particularly want them to do work that they hated during the pandemic when everybody was already really stressed. And that's when I thought, actually, let's do a subscription box. I had this little engraving cutting machine, which I'd learned to use. And I thought, I started off just by making little wooden shapes and things for my own children. And I thought, I used to do it as more of a hobby more than anything else. And it just, I don't know how it snowballed. We launched the subscription box. We took 100 subscriptions almost overnight within, so I think it was 4 days of opening the doors. Wow. To the point that I actually closed the doors because I got scared. So how am I going to put 100? I was thinking, there's 20 little boxes, the children can help and we'll do it together. And, a fun little cottage, a little work business from home. I thought that would be lovely. Then we took 100 subscriptions, 4 days, and then we shut the doors because at that point, these were subscriptions as well. They're not one-off orders. So people wanted monthly items. And, I just got a little bit scared, I think. We shut the doors and we fulfilled them. But literally in that week, right, our house went up for sale because we needed premises. We couldn't manage. People were banging on our door saying, we want this subscription, and so we eventually, I think 3 months later, we opened the doors again to the public and allowed more people to come and subscribe. And then 6 months later, by the time we got to June, so I started in January, by the time we got to June, we'd moved house out of Leicestershire into Lincolnshire, which was quite stressful, I'm not going to lie. 2 kids in tow and moving a business and moving house at the same time. I do not recommend it to anyone to do all of that all at once together. But we did it, we've got premises. We, immediately we started hiring staff. Just having the space helped. And, you just manage it. The kids, they helped, as they've grown, they obviously enjoy the crafts that we put out. They do think of our workshop as their own personal toy shop. And it's like a free-for-all every time they go in there.
I love that. I love that. See, I was going to say, the fact that you mentioned earlier that they had all this schoolwork to do that was sent home and you kind of just threw it out the window and was like, no, the kids ain't doing that. And so when you kind of showed your kids the method of teaching that you came about, right, that you're now putting out there, did they say, Mum, this is mad. This isn't work. This is playing, right? Like, what was their thoughts?
Their thoughts are very much that it's really unfair that they have to go to school and all the little crafters children get to do this. And we have that conversation regularly, but you know, I think with school, right? I think there's a place for school, and I think there's a place for home education and alternative methods of learning. I do think there are issues with the schooling system, which I don't completely agree with. But for my own children, who I'm very, very lucky, they're neurotypical. So, you know, they don't have challenges that some children have when they go to mainstream school. And also, the things that I don't like about mainstream school, like the another brick in the wall scenario, the behaviorism approach, I can sort of teach them another way from home as well, because they still get exposure to little crafters and the alternative way of working and learning and just enjoying life. And also going beyond that, they're also, I mean, our workshop is next door to where we live. So it's all on the same, they're different sites, but they're within walking distance. So even from a very, very young age, the children have opportunities to do bits of work experience and learn processes and see how a business, you know, bricks and mortar business actually operates. And I think that will give them invaluable skills as they grow up. My eldest, he's 9 now, but even since he was 7 years old, he can work the Royal Mail postal system, which is amazing, you know.
What do you mean by that?
So we put out, obviously, hundreds and hundreds of parcels go out in our post every single month. So he is able, you have to, when you've got a business account, you have to actually go onto the postal system, you log into Royal Mail, you know, we've brought all the addresses across from our website into Royal Mail where the parcels are going, and you just put them through. You say how much they weigh, where they're going, and then it'll print you out a nice little label which goes onto the box. It means you don't have to go to the post office and get a stamp. Because we get sacks and sacks of post. You know, and he has sat there and he's done hundreds of these. They get pocket money for doing this, you know. But what a skill.
Yeah. Oh my
Whenever they feel like it, you know, there's no child labor or anything like that going on. We do have staff.
No, I love it. Basically, you created yourself a little worker bee, right?
Yeah, when they feel like it. It tends to be more in the sort of summer holidays. Sometimes they'll go into an hour at the weekend.
Yeah.
So it's just when they feel like doing a little bit, you know, it's nice that we can give them that sort of real business exposure and sort of teach them those other skills that they perhaps don't get in mainstream education. So we're trying to do it so that they've got the best of both worlds for now. And it works for our family.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Now, I'm curious. Why did you not just take your kids out completely from mainstream school and just teach them the way that you're teaching all these other kids?
They get both. So, I mean, if somebody, the way I look at mainstream school, right, if they weren't in mainstream school, especially at the very beginning of Little Crafters Boxes, I wouldn't have been able to help the thousands of children that we've helped. So I do need some help with them. I wouldn't be able to home educate them full time and then be able to do Little Crafters things as well. Saying that, you know, never say never. We haven't completely decided yet if they will go to secondary school or whether they will just embrace whatever comes next with Little Crafters Boxes. Our children now in the wider community, you know, yes, they're learning in a different way, but they still have access to qualifications. We're looking at opening an exam centre here on site so that they can come and do their exams, you know, by the time they get to that age, if they want to. But it's an interest-led approach. It's therapeutic. It's constructivism. That means that we build on their thoughts and their interests rather than telling them what they have to learn and in what order. And that works. You know, I've seen the transformation, and having seen those transformations, I'm not going to lie, it's like really scary saying that I might take my own children out of school, being an ex-teacher and being a scholar and being as academic as I was, you know. But I think actually leaving teaching and working with a different community and really understanding education has given me a very different view on education holistically, I suppose. And I can see that there is actually another way now. When you're in education, working inside the system, you're quite indoctrinated, and you do it a certain way because that's all you know, and you get told that that's the right way. And I believed that as well for a very, very long time. It's only now that I actually can see it from a different perspective, and actually there are other ways, and we're actually doing our children a disservice by not showing professionals that there are more than one way to get to the other side, because there's loads of children now falling out, and that's because these children need that other way, and mainstream can't provide it because they don't have the training, and that's where we are now.
Wow, that is awesome. That's awesome. Oh my goodness, I've got so many more questions to ask you. And so, as your kids are basically grown up, right, and seen like mum was a teacher, right? She decided to have this wacky idea that no one thought that would work out. It would just be a little hobby, right? And now you've created this massive business, right? Where you're making six figures in your business within 3 years of this idea populating, right? And have they come to you and said, Mum, like, how are you doing this? I want to do this too. Like, I want my own business. Have they started asking those kinds of questions?
My eldest has.
Ooh,
He is very, very academic, and he's got these little books now on being an entrepreneur, and
wow.
he's been reading away, and he thinks that, he's going to one day take over Little Crafters.
Ah,
My eldest, sorry, not my eldest, my youngest, he's more of a socialite. He just wants to party and have fun. And he often asks me things like, Mummy, when you die, will I just get all your money?
oh my goodness.
So he's got a different strategy in mind. It's not quite the same thing.
Oh my goodness. That's,
But yeah, no, I think, whatever they do, we'll support. They've got a bright
yeah.
future ahead, I'm sure. I think the key is just letting them follow their own interests and desires.
Mm,
And in terms of the actual growth of the business, it was never about, for me, it's never been about the six figures or the multi six figures or even seven figures, which I'm sure we will get to. It's always been about listening. And that's why it's grown, I think, because over the years, we have listened and we have looked at the landscape of education, and we're looking at how the tide is turning, and we are listening to those customers and asking them what it is they need, and then providing them with that. And I think that's key. With education, it's not just, like a simple textbook exercise when you listen to your customers and you go, oh, we want to improve our customer service, blah, 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 blah. It's not about that. It's about, because this is life-changing stuff. They're in desperate need. They need stuff. And it transforms their lives when you give it to them. So we're making such an impact. And I think that is the impact that has motivated the growth. And yes, there may be some fruit at the end of that, but that's not what I'm particularly looking for. Financially at the moment, it's more about the change, and I'm loving the change. It makes me really happy.
I love it. Oh my goodness. We can tell that you're really passionate about this as you talk, right? This is awesome. Now, I want to speak about some of the ups and downs that you've had. Now, we are in the same mastermind group, okay, with Lisa Johnson, and that's how we've got to meet. And there was a message that you put out there in Slack that we have within our private community, right? And you said you were fighting to build a school, right? And I remember we had this conversation in London, right, down Piccadilly Circus before we went to go play Crystal Maze. Yeah, because we
did.
used to play too, right? Right. And you're talking about how you're building this school and how it's going to be, so impactful. It's going to change so many different ways around how people do things, like the teaching. Like you were super, super excited, right? And then you put a message out there, I think a month or so after, to say that the school's not going to happen. Can you just share a little bit about what happened there, right, and how you felt?
Yeah, so it's been an ambition of mine to open a school for a long time now. I'd say a good decade. Even while I was still a teacher, I tried to obtain a building where I used to live. That was an old school that had shut down. So I wanted to reopen that. The population of the town we used to live in had grown, and I wanted to open up the school again, so that there was a space for the children. But that school had been earmarked for residential by the council. So rather than opening a school back then, they stopped it in its tracks and they put more houses there, which I thought was ludicrous. So I
Oh.
couldn't do it then. So it kind of died a death. And at that point, I didn't do it. Now that we are where we are with Little Crafters boxes, the opportunity has presented itself again. We are at a stage where I am now sort of another 10 years into my practice, so I know that much more now. Specialism with children that have got special educational needs. And we've got an established business that actually runs an established curriculum, which has been tried and tested. We know it works. The children within our existing community are growing as well. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to open on site. We've got, quite a large site here in Lincolnshire. I wanted to open a school on this site. But, I feel as though there's so much bureaucracy. I've been trying to do this for a while. There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through with things like planning permission, local authorities, and then, funding, how to get funding for various things that need to happen. And, you start jumping through the hoops. And at the point that I think I spoke in our group, I think I was at a place where it just feels as though there's so many obstacles in the way. It's not easy, and I'm a professional that really understands. I could provide so much value. I really understand education. I understand that style of education and how to make it outstanding. I could really provide a great, something really, really special, but I just felt like there were so many obstacles in my way. And going through the motions made me realize that actually, if I continued down this path right now, it's going to take away from what I'm currently doing, because I am still the CEO of another company, which Little Crafters Boxes, and that takes a lot of my energy, and I haven't got time to battle. It has to be as easy as possible. They should be throwing support and money and everything at me to do this, because it's so rare to find somebody, that's got the skills. And in the end, the decision was that for now, I haven't completely ruled it out. I'm not going to lie. It's still sort of. I've sent an email to my local council, with my thoughts and what I would like to see happen, and I've left it there. I will be unemotional about. I will try and be unemotional about it happening or not happening, as it were. But as it stands, I don't know. I'm not sort of setting my heart on it at the moment. It'll become more like a 3 or a 5 year plan, which will kind of give me a bit more time to get my ducks in a row and really establish Little Crafters Boxes.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so we're just putting it to the side for now, right? Because the battle, the fight isn't worth it right now, because you're going to lose focus in your business, and we don't want to do that because you're helping so many people right now, right? So this is awesome. So this also shows that sometimes we do need to pivot, right? We do have to kind of make different kind of decisions, because there are twists and turns that will happen, but it doesn't mean that you totally give up, right? It just means that you just got to take a different direction and come back round at it later on down the line, right? And I love that you're doing this. This is a great point here. And so I checked on social media, right? Because I love checking all of my guests on social media to see what they're really getting up to, right? And so a few months ago, I saw some stories that you put up, okay? And you got really upset. You were really, really upset. You were almost in tears. And this is where we realize that challenges come in all sorts of different forms. They're not always huge, right? But at the time, they're huge for us. And so you actually purchased, I think it was some shelves from IKEA. Do you remember?
No, yes, I remember.
You know what I'm going to say? You ordered some shelves from IKEA. And you measured up and everything. Your husband went down, right? This is where your husband really supports, right? On all these different little things, different levels, right? But they all count. And you got it back, and you had this slot that is meant to go in, and it didn't fit, right? Could you share with our audience that what was going through your mind, because you were so upset? You did these videos on stories. You were in tears. Right, and what was actually going on here?
Right, okay, you could get me started for a long time on this, Kay, now, because I actually have a problem. So we bought these shelves, and they weren't originally earmarked for that space. But when I saw this space, we had this really awkward space in our house, and I took one look at the shelves. We were tidying the room, on a Sunday afternoon, as you do. And I looked at the space and I pondered to myself, what could we do with this space? And I saw the shelves and I thought, actually, these shelves would go really, really well in this space. And, we can use it for X, Y, and Z. So, brought the artillery in, the brawn came in, the husband came, the two boys followed him, because they like to think they're daddy's little helpers. And they started scratching their heads and they got their tape measures out, and started doing their things with it. And they decided that it wasn't going to fit. To which, I completely disagreed. It absolutely was going to fit.
This is what I love. You were like really persistent, like it's gonna fit in there. It's gonna
It had
happen.
to fit, yeah. It had to fit. It was textbook. They said, right, it was ever so slightly too small because of the skirting board and because, you had to kind of go around a corner to angle the shelves in and the angling wasn't right and all this jazz, right? All these fancy words about angles and things. So I said, no, let's try it. Let's try putting it in. So, it took both of us to lift it. And the boys are saying, it's not going to fit, mummy. It's not going to fit. But I was, just ignored them for a moment. And so we had to lift the shelves over the skirting board to then angle it into this corner space. And obviously it didn't fit and it got stuck in the wall because then we couldn't get it out either. It got wedged in this sort of corner of we couldn't pull it out or push it in. So not only did it not fit, it was then stuck. And then everyone was going, oh yeah, we told you it wasn't going to fit. And then Eric started, saying to me, that, I should have listened to him and all this nonsense, nonsense about listening. So, eventually he got this back out again. And I told him that he had to make it fit. He had to figure it out. I said, can't you shave a bit off the side or something like that? Nobody will see once it's in. It's in. We're not going to move it. So, the shelves went outside, started shaving bits off the side, huffing and puffing as you do. And after sort of 2 or 3 goes, we eventually got it to fit and it worked. But
Awesome.
it was a huge celebration and my shelves now sit proudly in that awkward space and they look fine. So the moral of the story, I think, here is always listen to your wife.
I love it. That's awesome. Oh my goodness. When I saw that story, I was like, this is absolutely hilarious, right? But it's so Radha, right? It was like so you. I was like, it's humorous. It wasn't at the time for you, right? But for everyone watching, it was like so entertaining, right? And we're like Radha all over, right? I loved it. I loved it. I'm
Yeah,
so
on
glad
the day, I remember back then we were
where there's a will, there's a way, always.
absolutely, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Now, I really want to talk about something that happened yesterday, 25th of July, right? 2024. I was scrolling through your social media again, right? And I saw that you have been interviewed by ITV Central News, right? Like you were on TV. How did that happen? And what was like? I know it was about your business and all the things that you're doing to impact change in the world. But I've got to know, how did that make you feel when you knew you were going to be interviewed on TV and everybody was going to see you?
Yeah, brilliant. At the moment, I feel as though there's a really important message that needs to sort of go out there. ITV got in touch because they are currently doing a spotlight, and it was a national story on SEND children and how there are so many of them without education and without alternative placements at the moment. And they asked me if I knew any families that would be willing to talk to them about, their issues with waiting for placements and how long they've been waiting. And Naturally, I have families all over the country because, we work with them. And so I was only too happy to, introduce a family to them. And they asked me to come along and share some words as well about, what's going on in education. And they're calling it the attendance crisis. But again, me being me, I disagree a little bit. There's a bit of an issue in politics at the moment where they think that children are not attending school or not having access to school, even though they're on school roll, and they want to get children back in school, which I hear, but there's no point putting a child back in school if they can't access the curriculum. Forcing somebody to sit in a room on a chair is not going to make them learn. And I think the point here seems to be more that they need to change that system, and they need to find a way whereby they can help that child access education. Then the child will engage with education. Otherwise, companies like mine exist because there is no alternative, and that's the point. I think those families that are all sitting in limbo should all have access to things like Little Crafters boxes, because at least they'll be getting some sort of certifiable education and have that therapeutic learning going on at the same time while they are fixing the system, because it's not an overnight fix. You can't just put all the kids back in and everything's wonderful again. Anyway, this is what the report was about. And yeah, they asked me to share my thoughts. So off I went and shared my thoughts, and it was it was great.
You looked awesome, and what you were actually sharing was actually mind-blowing, right?
Thank you.
I feel like you've created a simple enough process, but it took someone like yourself to step into that and say, no, this change needs to happen, right? To create the impact that you have done. And so much so that ITV Central News interviewed you. Like, that just speaks volumes. And the fact that this all started with just an idea, like it was just going to be a little hobby, right? And now the biggest thing is, I can say I know someone famous. Right? But it just shows when you follow your passion, when you keep pushing forward, right? These things do actually happen, and it becomes easier because all you're doing is following your passion. All you're doing is that drive to make sure that you are making an impact to certain individuals because you know that change needs to happen. And I love that about you. Like, you're on fire all the time. You are. Although, like, we know you've got an emotional side, and that's fine. It's absolutely fine, right? But we love that about you. Right? And the thing is, we had this conversation off camera, right? And you were saying, but you say ums and ahs a lot, and you say I think a lot, and you can get emotional. I'm like, but who said those things are wrong? No one. There's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, this is why we love you, Radha. This is why we all love you, right? Because we know it's coming. We're like counting on those tears now. There's been no tears on this episode, but
No, I haven't cried yet. Yet.
Oh, well, I know you have a special gift, right, for all of our listeners today. And I would love for you to share what that special gift is and also how it's going to benefit them.
Sure. So we have a special guide for everybody today that they can download from our website, and it's all about crafting their way to calm. And we're all about therapeutic learning, but therapeutic activity in general, really, to help you feel calmer, less anxious. And that applies to children and adults. It's ageless, really, because I think that's something we could all do more of. So you can download a free guide on our website, and that is littlecraftersboxes.co.uk/wellbeing.
Awesome. Oh my goodness, guys. Make sure you do get that download, right? This is your first step to kind of seeing a different perspective on what education could be like, right? How it can be so much more fun than what we all knew what schooling was like. So go ahead, reach out to Radha, right? Like, go and stalk her out on social media, right? Do it, right? Connect with her. Get the downloadable, because she's going to be showing you a whole different perspective of what education can be like, and it can actually be really good fun. So make sure you connect with her. Radha, oh my goodness, it was so awesome to have you on this show. Like, so many golden nuggets in such a short amount of time. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Thanks for listening to Make Your Mark podcast at www.makeyourmarkpodcast.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get this and every other episode that comes out. We have lots of great stuff coming, so make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And thank you in advance for all the reviews and comments. I appreciate it so much, and I look forward to serving you in next week's episode.